ironically, I came off as a very confident person in the digital space. But when it came to personal interactions, that confidence did not exist. That confidence was in the digital space and it stayed there. So I didn't do any of the internal work. My confidence laid in filters, FaceTune, perfected images of myself, and the real me was not good enough. Hello you guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Ellie Jane. I'm kind of a nicheless girl on the internet right now, so I do anything from cooking videos to talking videos to what I eat in a day, all that type of stuff. So if you're into that, subscribe and join the journey. So I created my first social media account in 2008, which was 15 years ago. I've gone through the good, the bad, and the brutally ugly of having social media in my life. This is a topic that's really important to me. Younger people who are vulnerable to the powers of social media, I just feel such a responsibility in my heart to not only share this for them, but even like anybody who has social media addiction or addictions to their phone in general. I've now reached a place where I have a very healthy relationship with social media. I really want to share how I got from someone who would pay attention to every like, every person that was watching my stories and mindlessly scrolling in the company of others, to someone who is a lot more intentional with social media and looks at it as more of a creative outlet and a place for inspiration instead of a place of comparison. Like I said, I had my first social media account 15 years ago when I was only 12 years old. And at the time, I didn't have a phone, I had a computer. Everyone had Facebook when Facebook came out. Like, it was just the buzz. And I was in junior high school. It was just such a fun place on the internet. I remember taking so many photos and putting them into albums of me and my friends, me and my family, and just like having fun with the titles. And I didn't care about what the photos looked like. I just uploaded them. There was no place of comparison. I was only friends with my family or my friends from junior high school, and junior high school was a very small world at the time. I didn't know other students from other junior high schools. Like, I just knew who was in my school, and that was it. And I never struggled with insecurities in that point in my life. I didn't even realize the fact that I had crooked teeth was like a big deal until someone pointed it out in person. Then in high school, Instagram came up, and I didn't have like an iPod Touch or a smartphone or anything like that. I just had a phone that you could text and call and play Snake on. But when I got an iPod Touch, that's when I was exposed to Instagram and I created my account. This was back in 2012, I believe. Before that, I actually made a Twitter, but I can't remember if I did that when I had a phone, iPod Touch. But I made a Twitter, and then I made an Instagram. That's when everything changed. Instagram was a place where you post one photo, and this photo had to be the best photo. And it's not like you were uploading 10 photos a day. You just post like once in a while. I went from posting anything and everything to suddenly, I need to make this the best photo. It was about the likes. If you reached a certain amount of likes, I think it was like 11 likes, then it would change from being able to see the 10 people that liked it to a number. And once you reached 11, it was like, okay, I'm good. Like, enough people liked it. And then stories happened, and you were just more and more exposed to not only what people were showing as like their highlight of their day, but then you were seeing more moments of that in their stories. And as a teenager, social media does not come with a warning sign. It doesn't come with a manual of how to use it and what's a healthy amount of social media to consume. And you're just so exposed to so much. I went from being friends with just friends and family to now being able to see the lives of people around the world. And of course there was YouTube. YouTube was like a more healthy form of social media back then. There were people like Bethany Moda and Michelle Phan and like those types of YouTubers who you watched for entertainment, but I never compared myself to them. But in this place of social media, you just see like these perfected people with airbrushed photos and And at the time, like, you didn't know that they were FaceTuned. So you were comparing yourself as like an obviously unphotoshopped, unfacetuned person to people who literally spend hours editing their photos. And as a teenager, I had no idea of this. When you're constantly looking at social media and comparing yourself to these people who make everything look so perfect, you suddenly want to portray yourself that way too, because that's what we're doing on Instagram. We're showing the best versions of ourselves. And it's not only just the best versions of ourselves, but we're showing a falsely perfected version of ourselves. I fell into this trap. I downloaded FaceTune. I started doing all the, smoothing, blurring, highlighting. I never really did like the cinching thing with like the waist and like the bum and whatever. You don't really notice when this happens, but you hand your confidence to a fake version of yourself. That version of myself, that Ellie Jane on the internet, was who defined me. I even noticed with Snapchat, like, I got so used to using filters. I hated how I looked without a filter on, and I literally would never send a Snapchat unless it had a filter on my face. And when you get to that point, you suddenly have a very false sense of what you actually look like, and you start to believe that when you see how you actually look in real life, you are suddenly disgusted or heavily dissatisfied with how you look in real life. And that confidence, it only shows in the digital space. So when I would go out into the real world and like interact with people and they're like, oh, I saw you on Instagram. And it's like, oh, like the thoughts that would be going on in my head are, do I look how I look on Instagram to them? Do I look worse? What do they think of me? I didn't wear the makeup that I would wear on Instagram. And I would apologize for my looks. And I literally, like I said, handed my confidence to someone that doesn't even exist. Ironically, I came off as a very confident person in the digital space. But when it came to personal interactions, that confidence did not exist because that confidence was in the digital space and it stayed there. So I didn't do any of the internal work. My confidence laid in filters, FaceTune, perfected images of myself, and the real me was not good enough. Moving on to how social media affected my personal relationships. So obviously, the more that you reach for your phone, the more you make that a habit. If it's unintentional, if it's not purposeful, I would constantly look at my phone for hours. The first thing I would do is look at social media, and that was so unhealthy because social media became a place of comparison for me, where I would compare myself to other girls and their bodies, their outfits. I wanted everything that they had, and it just made my life feel less than. And my confidence, every time I started the day like that, it would just go lower and lower and lower and lower. Over a certain amount of time, you can imagine where that brings your confidence to. And I didn't have the awareness to understand that this is what was going on in my mind unconsciously every time that I went to this app. I would say Instagram was probably the most negative in my life, if not the only negative in my life in terms of social media. It really affected my mental health. I just felt like my life wasn't exciting. I fell into a really dark place during my first year of university. I felt so alone. I don't want to get too deep into that, but I was very depressed, and I know that social media did not help that situation at all. Just being on my phone and being tied to this digital world that didn't benefit me and didn't encourage social interactions. I really isolated myself and literally just fueled what was making me sick. And so I had to reverse that. So understanding what that does, not only to you, but to your relationships when you're with people and you find your mind just thinking of your phone and just literally scrolling on social media in the presence of another person. It's really unfortunate that that's just a normal habit for some people, but it happens right under our noses, and it's something that builds up over time. Just like any other habit that we have in our life, good or bad, it is something that accumulates. It gets harder and harder to reverse. So I want to tell you the steps that I took to reverse all these bad habits that ultimately led to having very poor self-esteem, self-confidence, and overall just a lack of awareness for social etiquette. Number one, take a look at what social media does for you. If you know subconsciously, maybe you're on social media too much, if you're literally driving and checking social media, if you are going to check social media in the middle of a conversation, conversation, if you stay up till like 2 a.m. looking at social media because you can't control yourself, I think these are serious signs that this isn't beneficial or healthy to you. I think understanding that you do have an unhealthy relationship with social media is the very first step, because once you understand that you do have an issue, you can then improve it. But if you can't even come to terms with the fact that you have an issue with social media, it will be a lot harder for you to take the next steps. Understand what value this brings into your life. I'm using Instagram as an example because I used it a lot and it did affect me a lot negatively. And I think the first place that you should look is your explore page. What does your explore page look like? For me back then, it was a lot of influencers, specifically girls who were models and had like really skinny bodies and had the perfect outfit. And I always found myself comparing myself to them, wishing that I had a bigger chest or smaller waist, having all these dope outfits. And your explore page just like reflects a lot of what you're consuming, because obviously the algorithm gets to know like what you click on. So I turned my explore page from a place of comparison to a place of inspiration. I stopped liking these photos of girls with perfect bodies and perfect faces and perfect angles and this and that. I started liking photos of art because I do really love seeing people's art. And I was like, why don't I just like try to find these accounts? Because the algorithm wasn't showing me those. So I had to like look, I had to type it. I had to click on this account, this account, this account, until eventually my explore page became just a place of art and inspiration. And I wasn't comparing myself to anybody. I was just appreciating everything that these people are doing. I'm like, yo, this is so dope. Like, and if you are someone that follows Instagram models and you don't compare yourself to them, that's great. Keep following them, keep liking their stuff, keep hyping them up. But for me, it became very unhealthy for me to constantly see people and having these unrealistic body standards who I can't even tell if they're real or fake. I now just love going to social media for creative inspiration and to just appreciate people's work. And again, that's not to say that anyone that's like an Instagram model isn't doing creative work, but it just became an unhealthy thing for me to consume on a daily basis. Whereas other creative outlets like drawing and AI art, digital art, videography, editing, motion graphics, like all that type of stuff, stop motion, I love stop motion animation. Those type of things would bring me more joy than bring me down and make me feel down about myself. People that you are following. So if you're following people that don't really serve a purpose in your life, and I'm talking more people you know in person, I'm honestly like overdue with unfollowing people that don't really serve a purpose in my life. There are some people that you just don't need to follow. You don't need to keep up with their lives. And I don't go on Instagram and just like check on everybody's stories and like look at my main page. If anything, I'm usually on my explore page. That's because if I want to catch up with someone and like learn about what they've been up to, I'd rather hear about it in person and experience it through their storytelling. I don't want to have to rely on social media to feel like I've kept up with this person. Any valuable relationship to me, I will save those conversations for when we actually meet instead of keeping tabs on them. And then the third thing I would say is practicing mindfulness with social media, being intentional when you decide to go on and not just scroll mindlessly, because when you scroll mindlessly, you could do that for hours. And if you think about 1 hour of scrolling a day, that's 7 hours of scrolling a week and 28 hours of scrolling in a month, which is, I need my calculator for this, 336 hours of scrolling without intention. That is 14 days straight of looking at social media. I just think there's so much more that you could do with your life that will fuel you. And once you realize like how much time you're spending on a device that doesn't do like a whole lot for you, when you have that set intention and you're educating yourself, you're learning something from it, you're getting inspiration, it's more purposeful, that develops a healthier relationship with social media. And if there is anything I'm consuming for hours at a time, it's podcasts that I'm listening to as I'm doing something else. And again, it's all about being intentional, understanding why you're doing something and for how long that you're doing it. But yeah, ultimately, I don't think it's impossible to have a healthy relationship with social media. I think you can have both. I'm happy that I've come to that place because I do really love social media. I love the great side of social media, I should say, the creative, supportive, of community building part of it. I think the world would be in a much better place if we just learn to practice this and to learn the balance of having social media as a part of our lives and not being our lives. And yeah, if you have any tips for how you created a healthier relationship with social media, leave them down below. I'm always trying to improve. I'm sure that others can learn from your tips as well. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It does really help the algorithm to share my videos with others. And if you'd like to see more videos from me, I will be doing more of these talking videos. Just hit the subscribe button, turn on the bell notifications on, and I will see you next week. Bye!